Welcome, everybody. I'm very excited today to be chairing today's faculty research showcase discussion. It's about the future of quantum technologies. We have four very active people in quantum technologies on different parts of quantum technology. Some of that is in research, and some of those people are very much involved in the infrastructures that are available for entrepreneurial companies. I would like to start first with the short introductions of the people who we have. I will mention that shortly. And then after their introductions, I will invite people to ask questions in the Q&A box, and we will then address them to the panelists. And if you do so, please remember to put the name of the person you are asking as well. So the four people we have today is Anthony Laing, who is heading up the CATS group or department, facility, CAT lab. So I'm getting confused. I'm sorry, Bristol, this is one thing that is so confusing. There's so many cats and kids and so on. But anyway, Anthony is heading up the CAT lab. And he also has a startup company. I hope he will mention that later. Mustafa Rampuri is very much involved in the infrastructure and the facilities and helping startups and companies to engage with Bristol University, and quantum technology is a very, very important part. We have Andy Collins, who I know for a very long time. I know him from CATS, this time it's correct. He now is involved in QTIC and also very active with the CDT. And he also has a spin-out company as well. And finally, it is Professor Reza Nijabati. And Reza is particularly involved in the quantum test bed that I believe is very new to Bristol and sounds very exciting. And so what I suggest now for our panelists to spend about 5 minutes each to introduce their area of work and how that might be interacting with the people, our participants today we have attending. Reza, if I could start with you, please.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Anke, for introduction. And I am really happy to be part of this exciting panel. Well, as you mentioned, my name is Reza Nijabati. I am professor at University of Bristol, and I am heading the high performance network groups in Bristol. My group is specialized on research and development of the hardware and software for creating communication network infrastructure for future quantum internet. My group includes a cross-disciplinary set of expertise, including the expertise and researchers from classical communication and computing to expertise and researchers from quantum communication and computing. These researchers work together essentially to bring the advanced concepts such as autonomous networking, software-defined networking, and virtualization, and combine it with the advanced concept in quantum domain, such as, for example, entanglement-based networking, and create an autonomous dynamic quantum network, which is suitable as a foundation of the future quantum internet. My research group is experimental focus. So we are part of a smart internet lab, and a smart internet lab has one of the most advanced research testbed for telecom in UK. It is not a lab-based testbed. It is a testbed built within the heart of the city. So it's a real-life testbed. It includes the mesh of the fiber networks. It includes a data center. It includes also advanced access technologies such as 5G. With my group, we have basically enabled this testbed to support quantum communications. We showcase that how it's possible to use quantum technology or quantum communication technology in a real life application. For example, recently we have shown how you can use quantum security, especially QKD, to secure a 5G network scenario or a 5G infrastructure. Now we are building more capability for this testbed. By end of the year, we are adding the advanced entanglement networking capability. We are adding, with our collaboration with our industrial partner, quantum computing capability, and also support for multi-user access. So once we have all of this, we have a real life test bed that allows our researchers, also our industrial and research collaborators, to come and test anything related to the quantum internet, including quantum security, including distributed quantum computing, or providing user access to the remote quantum computers in a real life testbed setting, which also supports classical communication or classical internet. So with this, I conclude my introduction. Yeah.
I would like to stay sort of on the university side, and I would like to ask Anthony Laing to talk a bit about the CAT Labs, but also about his work and his startup. Anthony, it's over to you.
Thank you, Anke. So I'm the co-director of CAT Labs together with Jonathan Matthews. So CAT Labs, that's QET, stands for the Quantum Engineering and Technology Labs. And our mission is to take quantum technologies out of the lab and engineer them into useful devices where they can benefit society. And there are sort of three broad areas of quantum technologies: quantum computing, so faster computers that can solve problems that are sort of forever out of the reach of the most powerful supercomputers. We think those will be able to allow us to design new drugs, better materials, and cleaner energy. There's also quantum sensing, so more sensitive gas sensors and less invasive biosensors, and quantum communications, which we just heard about from Reza. So this is basically quantum communication that's secured by the laws of physics. This all sits inside of a larger national program that was kicked off in 2013 by the then Chancellor George Osborne, who announced a £270 million investment in quantum technologies and kind of the launch of 4 national hubs. And Bristol's part of 3 of those 4 hubs. So part of the communications hub, which is centered at York, the imaging hub, which is a kind of sensing, that one's centered at Glasgow, and the computing hub. So I'm Bristol's or CAT Labs representative in the computing hub. Jonathan Matthews works in the imaging hub, and John Rarity works for the communications hub. And this national program has continued now with funding through, still with EPSRC, but also with Innovate UK, who have a budget of several hundreds of millions of pounds to roll out startup companies. And we've have a really sort of thriving ecosystem in Bristol that we'll hear more about from Andy and Musti later on. But that includes KETS, which is a quantum security company, QLM, a gas sensing company, and then the company that I co-founded, Duality Quantum Photonics. And I co-founded that together with Alberto Politti, whose PhD thesis actually kicked off integrated quantum photonics back in 2006. He now works at Southampton, where he leads a nanofabrication group, and he fabricates the devices for Duality. We're basically a special purpose quantum computing company. So we design and engineer integrated photonics devices to target particular problems that are of sort of commercial interest. And the chief science officer for Duality is David Tew, who's now an associate professor of quantum chemistry at Oxford. He was also a Royal Society fellow in Bristol. Okay, and then this national effort sits inside a bigger international effort that's kind of growing and gathering pace. There was talk of a quantum winter at some point, but actually it feels like it's, even pandemics aside, we're still sort of right in the middle of the summer for quantum. So this is an EU flagship for quantum technologies of order of 1 or more billion euros. National programs in the US, in China, and Canada. And also huge efforts from the big tech companies. So, Microsoft, IBM, and Google all have big efforts to develop quantum computing. And in particular, Google announced a breakthrough result in 2019, what they call a quantum computational supremacy. They demonstrated a device based on superconducting qubits that could solve a very abstract problem faster than the world's best supercomputer. But now the clue there is that it was a really abstract problem. We still really don't have a clear route to a full-blown digital error-corrected quantum computer. And in fact, even in quantum communications, to roll out kind of a global quantum internet, we need new technologies. Again, so we really need to engineer a new and more sophisticated capability. as part of that technology ecosystem. And so that's really what KET Labs is gearing itself up for now, for the next 10 years, is to go back down to the TRL levels, engage with deeper technology. And so in the context of photonics and quantum computing, to really engineer push button light sources, so where you push a button and a photon comes out, deterministic entangling gates, so we take two photons and deterministically entangle them into an entangled state. And we're doing this through a program called Heterogeneous Integrated Quantum Photonics, where in the past we've really researched homogeneous integrated quantum photonics, so single material devices. But now we need to integrate diamond color centers, quantum memories, push button sources, entangling gates, more sophisticated electronics, to really deliver a more powerful and sophisticated platform for quantum information processing. And already this year we've had some breakthrough results in that direction. So my colleague Jonathan Matthews actually got the front cover of Nature Photonics by bonding an optical chip together with an electronic chip, and delivered the world's fastest detector to detect sort of properties of a quantum state. A Bristol student, Chloe Clear, has just had a paper published in Applied Physics Review, which again modeled deterministic photon sources. And my group recently published a paper in Nature Physics that showed how AI can be used to characterize quantum systems. So I think that's my 5 minutes up, and then a little bit more. So I'll stop myself there and hand back over to you, Anke.
Thank you, Anthony. It's very exciting, and I will ask you something about what you just said for the clarification of the people who are here. But I'm always amazed how I think I know what you guys do, and then I always learn something new. So thank you. From that, we are now going more towards sort of the infrastructure that is available to people who want to work in quantum technology. What Bristol actually is putting in place to help them and to attract and support, I think, the translation also from the excellent work done at Bristol University into industry to the benefit of the wider society. Mustafa, if I ask you to explain what you do and how your work fits into the quantum technology future.
Sure, thanks, Anke. So I'm Musti Rampuri. I'm director of Bristol's Quantum Technologies Innovation Centre, and I'm also director of enterprise services within research and enterprise development here at Bristol. So my role is to establish an ecosystem within Bristol. That's predominantly what I'm here to do, and to do that, we're providing the right opportunities, tools, facilities, and infrastructure to attract and retain startup businesses, new ventures, corporates, to attract them to the city, to be part of a sort of a virtuous circle of research, technology development, and new business creation. That's kind of supportive of our mission and journey as a university. So Anthony and Reza have talked about the sorts of activities that they're doing, and importantly, Anthony mentioned that the purpose or the vision for KET Labs is to develop technologies and get it out into the real world, out of the lab and into the real world. And my bit of the picture is that sort of engaging with the real world end of it. So we are providing this innovation center. It's currently in its pilot phase. It's down in Cathedral Square in the center of Bristol, and Andy will describe all the functionality of that later. But perhaps the sort of the bigger picture piece here is about how do we enable and ensure that the university is well connected into the UK National Quantum Technologies Programme, international programmes, connected to corporates, to small businesses and the supply chains that come with that, to ensure that our work gets out there, that investment comes back into the university, that there is a pipeline of skills and talent, and that we're able to support the journeys of individuals through their academic careers, and if they're entrepreneurially inspired, to support them on that entrepreneurial journey, but to give them the kind of place to go, and which is local but excellent, really world class. And I think that it's a unique string to Bristol, and it's why Bristol is one of the leading places in the world to be developing and researching in quantum technologies at the moment, is because we have absolutely everything from foundational quantum mechanics and quantum information theory all the way through to our ability to spin out and start up and support entrepreneurs and new ventures. And I'm here, and my team are here to enable the kind of the smooth transition, that sort of seamless approach to be able to connect up individuals to that ecosystem. There's a huge amount, and I can waffle on for ages about the various different approaches to how we might curate and manage that landscape, and the various approaches to IP. But I think I've probably taken up my 5 minutes now, and we'll hand back to you, Anke. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you too. And we can always come back to some of the things you haven't mentioned and can ask you some questions. And finally, Andy, you have experience, you've been very much actively involved in this sort of infrastructure or ability or service for companies, but you also are using it. What is your, maybe you explain, how what you do now fits in, and how the other things might have enabled and fed into what is developing in Bristol now.
So yeah, thanks Anke, and thanks everyone else. So I suppose the first place to start off is I work on the enterprise services team with Musti, and I'm based in the Innovation Centre. Formerly, I was working with, and still am, the Quantum Technology Enterprise Programme, and we had a remit as part of the hubs that Anthony was talking about. You've got your comms, your computing, you've got metrology and imaging. All of these themes that quantum technology is being researched in, it was realised shortly after the instigation of those that there was a need for the training, which is where we have the centres for doctoral training, of which Bristol is very lucky to have one of only 2 operational at the moment. There was formerly 3. And also skills and training hubs that were set up to help commercialise that technology. So it's not enough to have great research and papers, although that's wonderful. To maintain a lead for the UK economy and to keep the UK out front, there needed to be commercialisation and getting that technology out of the lab and into the marketplace. And to that end, we started off with Quantum Technology Enterprise Centre. That was founded by one of the founders, it was funded by EPSRC, and it was set up by one of the founders of PsiQuantum that came out of Bristol. And then they immediately moved over to California for various reasons. And then we started up, and we thought, well, okay, well, do academics want to commercialize their research? And very happily, the answer was yes. And so to date, we've had 48 fellows, if you count the executive fellowship programs that we run. And between them, they've managed to raise just shy of £50 million of venture capital funding. It's the most recent figure. And that's not just from Bristol. We've managed to attract talent from all over the world, basically, to come to the UK, to come to Bristol specifically because of its strength in quantum engineering. And the next phase of that is now that we are moving into the Innovation Centre. So as Musti indicated, we have this purpose-built facility that's not research lab space, it's dedicated commercial lab space with the facilities and infrastructure in place to help people commercialize their quantum ideas and do it within an infrastructure of excellent academic research that's taking place at the university, and as part of that wider UK network as well. We've got links all over the country, up and down, and so we're still supporting some of our QTech companies as well. So QLM, Light Metrology, they're still in the area. They're doing gas sensing. Duality, Anthony's spin out. Hopefully, I'm doing a sales pitch for Anthony here. They'll move into QTech as well, putting him on the spot. But also we've been involved heavily with Carmen, who was the CEO of New Quantum, recently received a massive amount of funding. They're a very exciting startup. Carmen is a former alumni of our QTech program. And we've got Phasecraft in the building at the moment, and Control as well, who do control systems. So there's lots of these small and larger quantum companies within Bristol at the moment, and they're supported by the fact that we've got this Centre for Doctoral Training, as well as all of this experience in commercialising these companies. So we can help people to find out where they sit. And where we sit nationally is as part of phase 2 of the quantum programme, the UK quantum programme. To date, it's had around 1 billion put into it or promised in the pipeline. And part of the phase 2, so first there was the research hubs, then there were the centres of doctoral training. Now we've got Bristol as the centre of commercialisation for quantum technologies. You've got the National Quantum Computing Centre, which is focusing obviously on the quantum computing side of things. And you've got the Metrology Institute being set up at NPL, and they've also got some commercialisation activity. We enjoy strong links to this. And so Bristol's really a focal point for helping people commercialise, but we work and operate within this larger infrastructure and globally as well. So we talk to people, we try to attract talent globally to come to Bristol and work with this. The CDT students, so with my other hat on as well, we've got over 60 active students, and Bristol's also set up a quantum photonics master's program. Now that's of interest because that means you're going to have quantum trained people come through within a year of starting their program, who can then be absorbed into these companies and into this infrastructure. They can go on to do their PhDs with the CDT and eventually work with a company through a sponsored secondment. We do funded internships. We have meetings with Google yesterday. We have meetings with IBM today. So we're talking to all of these companies, and it really is a close-knit community, which means there's opportunities there for both the students and the people to engage with companies, either through their research or their training, or also if they start up a company, they can engage with these bigger players. BAE Systems has been involved, Thales, and there's a real tech strength in the Southwest. We've got photonics cluster, there's the, and I'll remind myself of the names, I wrote it down. Yeah, so just over last year alone, there was 525 million invested in companies in the Southwest around Bristol. Bristol and the Southwest area is the third largest region outside of London for VC tech investments. So it's a fantastic place. All along that M4 corridor, we're just behind Oxford. So as you move out from London, there's all of this expertise. There's the Newport Wafer Fab, there's IQEP, down in Southwest Wales, there's lots of photonics cluster expertise. So Bristol's got a real strength in photonics, but that's not just the only thing we do. So there's a lot of support. We've got the quantum photonics integrated chip fabrication facility for rapid prototyping around here. There's a lot that can be done when a company starts up in Bristol, and so that's our real strength. I've waffled on for 5 minutes, so I'll hand back over to you, Anke.
Thank you very much. That was a very good pitch for Bristol. And I think so. The one thing I would like to come back to is you mentioned how you fit into the wider sort of local area as well, you know, the activities. So how do you work with them? How do you work with the other clusters? How do you work with larger companies? What is it? And maybe, I don't know if it's you, Andy, or Mustafa, you know, maybe you can answer that, you know, what, because that must be great benefit that you have, you know, these companies, these other things going on around you. How do you tap into that?
Musti, do you want to go first on that one?
Yeah, sure. So I guess it's worth, to answer that question, you have to sort of paint the context and the backdrop bit first. So, you know, we talked about all these programs of activities that we got, but if you follow the journeys of people through that, then it kind of explains how we got to where we got to. So, you know, Andy's talked about the Centre for Doctoral Training. We've trained up really, you know, brilliant quantum scientists, but are given some, you know, an entrepreneurial flavour. They've become entrepreneurially inspired. We've then have you know, then what do we do with these people? Well, you know, they can go off and do all manner of things or become academics, or you know, but traditionally they would either end up in corporate world or they'll go on to do become academics or into the academic world. But with this entrepreneurial flavour, we then have the enterprise training program, QTech. So we've given them a step over and a year's worth of training and support and mentoring and advice and guidance, in which they can initiate their own business. They can start up a venture around quantum technologies. And then, you know, then you ask the question, then what? You know, what happens then? So, you know, if we want to keep them here in Bristol, we need to anchor them and we need to find a place for them. And that's the purpose of QTech. And so, you know, we now have a pipeline of people and a place to put them. But, you know, so what? Then what? You know, what do we do next? You know, what do we make? How do we make those companies successful? And that's when this broader ecosystem kind of really kicks in. So we incubate those businesses, those new ventures, and we have the SetSquared program that you're probably familiar with, Anke, that can then really make those businesses robust and investable. Really sort out how they are structured and organized, get them in front of investors, and then they start on their kind of growth trajectory. And that then sort of becomes the new context, the new backdrop of Bristol for the university. And what's really important to investors, and why Bristol is really good, is because we have already curated that ecosystem, and that and there's lots of advice and guidance from mentoring and entrepreneurs in residence, and from other agents in the system who can pass on their knowledge and their open up their little black books, and help to build the ecology of businesses in around here. And the net benefit for the university is that they're then part of a multi-100-million-pound industrial activity as well. A pump as part of that, right at the center of it, and over time, more and more of that investment will come back. The kudos, the credibility, and all the rest of it. That aims to support and attract and retain other businesses, corporations, and all the rest of it into the city, and for the the net benefit of supporting the university and what we're trying to achieve. And I think there is this kind of virtuous circle that we're trying to support and build, and I guess we've created those bits of program, but the next bit of that is about the culture within the university, and the permissiveness to do this sort of stuff, and without that, none of it would happen. I mean, you can have all of these programs, but if no one's interested, or they're just not allowed to engage with it, because it's seen as not the right thing for your career, then it's going to go nowhere. So we've done a huge amount of work on the sort of the cultural context within the university to enable that to be a thing, so that people will want to engage with it, see it as a totally viable, beneficial, and important thing to be doing, and just as important as becoming an academic, or just as important as going into the commercial world. So I guess that is the sort of the landscape that we have here, and what we've been trying to do to help connect it all up with lots of different companies, really big ones like Google and IBM and all the rest of it. Andy, was there anything you wanted to kind of add to that?
Just to say, in terms of the engagement with industry and how things happen, we're very lucky in that there's a lot of interest in quantum, and that's not just because it's fun and interesting. It's because many of the larger companies know, even if they're ignorant of the technology itself, they know that a lot of money has been invested by the government and by other companies and by key players overseas. And one of those reasons is that it will have a transformative impact. There will be a step change because of it. And I think we're very lucky that in the initial stages of the UK National Quantum Technology Programme being established, one of the key foundations of that was not just let's throw money at the research. At every single stage, both when it was purely research within EPSRC, all the way through to moving through to Innovate UK and to the joint competitions that are open now, at least for another week, I think, so people still have time to put something in. But industry has to be involved, and that's useful because industry wants to engage, they want new products and new services, and it also gives the academic side of those interactions projects for PhD students, actual goals to work towards, where there are applications. And that's not just blue skies research is brilliant and great things come out of it, but there's also another viewpoint where if you're working with someone that has a real problem, you can start to solve some real thorny issues, things like how can you design electronics that aren't going to quench your super cool, by which I mean temperature, dilution refrigerator. These issues come out of trying to scale up and working with companies. And so at every stage, working with companies is important. And so we're very lucky, and not just at Bristol, but nationally, that all of the researchers have engaged with companies at all levels, the small SMEs, little startups like, I think it's called Q-Devil. They do sort of ultra cold electronics, all the way through to your Oxford Instruments, who are setting up a fabrication facility in Bristol as a result of some of the strengths around here. And I think long may that continue. I see QTIC, our innovation centre, and some of the activities in Bristol as a way of having all of those people of all sizes to be able to come and work together and actually come up with these new products. And so we're lucky that there's buy-in from the industrial side on that front.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Just one thing I might want to say, I don't know how many people in the audience are actually aware of that. We talk a lot about startups, but in quantum technology, startups are really quite important because there's a certain level, I would say established companies can only take things to. There's really high risk. And we need people who are prepared, and also the finance who are prepared to invest in this high risk. And we find that quantum is too early for larger companies to actually really embrace it as much as the startups do. So we actually have found, and I'm not an economist, but I'm learning while over the years now, since I've been involved in the quantum program, it is a very important part of an emerging technology to actually nurture those startups. And so I just want to put this in context. That's probably why we're talking about it. I would like to move a little bit more over to the research side. And Anthony, you did speak about heterogeneous sort of photonic devices. I think I know what that means, but maybe you can explain why this is important to the audience.
Yeah, so I guess there's a kind of a global infrastructure in fabricating devices, homogeneous integrated quantum photonic devices. So silicon photonics, even silicon nitride photonics. There are foundries around the world that can do this, and they're called CMOS compatible foundries. They're the same kind of foundries that make the chips that go inside computers and phones. And part of the arguments for commercializing the technology that CATLabs has already developed is that it can then be translated to sort of mass manufacture in these kinds of foundries. However, it's kind of that can only really take you so far, and the best models that we have for quantum computing that can be implemented in homogeneous integrated quantum photonics really raise questions about kind of scalability. That they take up vast resources, and you find this with all of the other platforms as well: superconducting qubits, ion trap quantum computing, and so on. So really what's needed is to go back into the lab and again engage with some of the tough challenges. Entangling photons deterministically, generating photons on demand that are really efficiently, and photons that are identical as well. Have got to be the same color, the same polarization. And this means that we've got to kind of take the chips that can come out of a foundry, like IMEC, for example, in Europe, and figure out how to, at scale, embed deterministic single photon sources or entangling gates. So basically kind of another level of sophistication. We can mass manufacture photonic chips right now in various places around the world, but that doesn't exist for these more sophisticated components. So heterogeneous integrated quantum photonics really is kind of taking on that challenge of basically, prototyping the individual components and then figuring out how we sort of roll that out to bigger, larger scale devices that can then be fabbed around the world, kind of at a scale that provides a route to full scale quantum computing. I mean, in the end, a digital quantum computer needs to generate millions and millions of qubits, quantum bits. That's going to require billions of components, all working, efficiently with high fidelity. And so this is heterogeneous quantum photonics is the start of that journey.
Yeah, and the key part also is you need different materials to achieve those performances. And aligning those different components that are manufactured separately is actually highly critical and is very, very difficult. So I assume that is also probably something you are looking into.
So, for example, color centers in diamond are a really interesting source of single photons and of quantum memories. So, we kind of generate a photon, which stores a qubit of information, propagates down a waveguide, but right now it just kind of keeps on propagating. We can't hold on to it and then eject it again at will. And that's what a quantum memory would do. And you can do that with a nucleus spin inside of a defect color center in diamond. So what we've got to do is, and Krishna Balram, who's an associate professor in engineering, is really sort of heavily engaged in this activity, figuring out how do we integrate nitrogen vacancy centers in diamond into silicon nitride chips to do just that kind of trick. So we can use those color centers to emit photons and to store photons, and potentially to even entangle photons, or to entangle qubits at least. But how do we integrate the two different materials, and then how do we do that at scale? That's really the challenge.
Yes, and I think this is also where you say, because you said your lab is focused on actually translating that from research also into industry and making things at scale. That is an important part. That's actually taking, I mean, the research that making one-off working is relatively easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's relatively easy. But compared to making something that works all the time is easy, because it's relatively cost effective as well, is a lot harder. And so that's probably what you're working, from what I understand, is what you're working on.
Yeah, I guess you can think of it as kind of the pipeline. That there's got to be a pipeline of technologies, and we've kind of done that in KET Labs over the last 10 years. We've taken, there wasn't integrated quantum photonics sort of 17 years ago. Now there is, and we demonstrated the different parts, with my colleagues, and now that technology is commercializable. We've got to start the pipeline again and engage with the next level of sophistication in quantum technologies and push that kind of all the way through. And it will probably take a similar kind of time scale.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you. That's very interesting. Reza, I'm coming to you. We have a question for you, and that's from Lauren Kling, asking. You mentioned the quantum internet, and he was asking, is it going to be as scalable as an internet network? Maybe you explain to the people what actually the quantum internet means.
Yes, I got this question quite a lot when I speak about the quantum internet, and I try to give an analogy, and also I want to pick up on what Anthony said. When we talk about quantum internet, I would like to bring people about, in the classical world, we are talking about the building the likes of the Google or Amazon or Facebook, means they have a massive computing capabilities, and they provide access to large number of users to do for your email, for your Facebook, for your YouTube, whatever you can imagine, for your trivial computing tasks. And quantum internet would be the similar analogy, if you like. But if you want to scale a quantum computer to a large scale that serves many application and user, a monolithic quantum computer with the technology was explained by Anthony and so on. There is a famous saying from the chief architect of the Google when they built the quantum computer. They said that if we want to build a decent-sized quantum computer, we need a football-sized cooling system. So they are working cryogenic temperature and absolute zero. So it's impossible to scale monolithically a quantum computer. The same way, because it's impossible to monolithically scale a server, a normal server, a computer. So that's why Facebook and Google, they are building what they call it data center or cloud computers. So it means they have lots of servers, they are networked together. So if you want to build a quantum internet, means that you have a reasonable size quantum computers, qubit processor with reasonable size, that they don't need a massive cooling system or massive control mechanism. And you try to scale them by networking them together across the geographically distributed spaces. So that's you can then it gives you capability, same way that Amazon and Google share their resources with the user. You can share your quantum capability with the user and scale it at the same time. That's something that mean exactly quantum internet. Now, the other thing is that it is not realistic if you say, as most of the research at the moment focus, because the earliest stage, they build a dedicated infrastructure for quantum communication or quantum internet. Means they have a very controlled condition, a very dedicated fiber, if you like, connecting to computing or user to a computer or creating quantum network. So this is not realistic. You have to come up with a proposition that you can upgrade existing infrastructure, telecom infrastructure, which is already BT, like of BT, Telefonica or Verizon, they have it, and they can build a quantum internet on top of that. One of the things that in Bristol, we are very strong. I mean, my group, together with Ket Labs, we try to come up with the technologies that you can coexist, what we call classical network and quantum network in the same infrastructure, which is really important for transferring technology to industry or making it attractive to industry. There is in the question, which is I can see is they say that there are publications about multi-user access. Yes, there are, but most of the work is focused on the multi-user for security. So security is a one application of the quantum communication. But if you talk about quantum internet, means that security combined with quantum computing and providing multi-user access. Security is not the only thing. On that respect, still we are far from it, and we have to do the research. In Bristol, we are very strong on the multi-user quantum communication, not only for security. I am hoping by Christmas, together with Ket Labs and our group, a big announcement come for the most advanced multi-user quantum network. But demonstration. But the thing is that at the moment we are building competency at the metro scale size of the network. But at the global scale, still we are far away from it. We need a technology such as quantum repeater or quantum memory, which Anthony explained, and Ket Lab are working on that to build those. We are still very much immature on that space. But I think we are in a very good position in terms of the maturity of the basic technology to build a quantum internet the way I explained it at the metro scale level and provide access to a large number of users. Yes.
Thank you. Just to the audience, if you have more questions, please use the Q&A section, and we will answer them. Reza, just who is involved in your metro network? Do you have BT involved in that, or?
The test bed belongs to basically University and Smart Internet Lab, but we do the industrial collaboration. For example, I mentioned that we have done a demonstration of the QKD for 5G security, and that was with BT, for example, was involved. That the industry get involved on a basically projects or demonstration basis, and we try to show them how the technology works in a real life scenario. Yeah.
And I know that you talked about you have classical communication combined with quantum communication. I assume that academics working on classical communication are working with you. What is the thing you found between each other? What is the most astonishing thing you came across, or people surprised, positive or negative in some ways? Things that you didn't expect.
It is because a lot of let's say 15 years ago, if you talk about the telecom researchers, they were quite separate from computer scientists.
Yes.
Now, telecom research, classical, and computer science are very, very much closely intertwined together. So concepts like AI, like autonomous networking, like network softwareization, all come from computer science side to telecom engineering. Yeah. The same way when we brought the classical telecom experts that already they both build those competency. Now we try to transfer them to basically combine them with the competency that exists in the quantum physics or quantum mechanics. For example, give you an example is application of AI, how you can space your classical channel and quantum channel in the same fiber. It's become very, very complex if you want to solve it with the quantum physics or quantum mechanics or mathematically. and is not scalable for a large scale telecom network. But we try to find using machine learning techniques, how we can solve this problem, which is coming from the classical world and computer science and telecom, if you like. So this becomes very fascinating. A lot of problems which is very hard to address them at a scale with the quantum mechanics, we find that there are some solution in the computer science or classical environment to address them. The other example, how you can basically create a multiple logical quantum secure network, or what we call it, quantum security, virtualization, quantum security. It's something that is not even considered in quantum domain. We brought it from classical domain, and we try to map the same concept and provide one way to go toward the multi-user access. Yeah.
Yeah, no, because I find that in order for quantum secure communication to work, you really need to work with the classical network for it to be rolled out very broadly. Otherwise, it will be very small and dedicated. So working across understanding or working with the classical communications people and trying to find ways how we can integrate and work together, that I think is extremely important. I agree, you know, it's really nice to see that work. If I come back now to IP, Mustafa, you mentioned IP is as a sort of a point. I almost guess it's an issue sometimes. I know that from companies working with university or with other people, it's quite an important part, securing IP. So what is it? What is your experience? What have you found, and how have you solved those problems?
Thanks, Anke. That's a real hospital pass. IP is a really thorny, tricky issue, and there are ways in which, you know, we can structure how we manage and organize IP. So within the university, you know, we think about how we patent ideas and new technologies and solutions as they're sort of emerging. But before you even kind of get to that stage, you know, people need to understand, you know, what is a patent, why might you need one, and what are the kind of the risks and the benefits that go with it. So, you know, again, we've done quite a bit of internal in-house training around that, bringing in kind of specialists, you know, external patent lawyers and all the rest of it to talk about, you know, the pros and cons of doing these things. You know, because before you even do that, you know, you need to make sure you haven't made a disclosure. So, you know, before you know, coming up with patents and that kind of thing, you know, you need to be mindful of how you deal with your communications around the research outcomes. So the journey starts with education and skills and training, and making sure that, you know, people understand you know, why they have to do things in a particular way. And then when it comes to developing patents, we have a tech transfer team, a research commercialization team within RED, within Research and Enterprise Development, who support the development of those, you know, the filings and ensuring that they're done appropriately and they're paid for. And then we maintain those patents in a portfolio within the university through a particular patent budget, and then we look to as if they're really interesting, then, you know, we might look at the regionality of where we want to file, and the increasing investment that goes with that. So the university has a sort of a smallish pot that it can apply, it can use to support patenting. But as those becomes more serious, then, you know, we can think about extending it into sort of the USA and other regions, and that's when it really becomes expensive. And then you know, having a patent is not an asset, it's a liability. You know, it sits on the balance sheet as a liability, so you have to do something with it. And we, you know, necessarily have to try and get it out of the university. And the idea there would be either to license it or to create a startup or a spin out business around that. So, licensing activity, again, that could be to a corporation, or it could be to another business. But with the specific intention that it gets used, what we don't particularly like at the university is to create IP that then is used as kind of patent thickets just to block necessarily, or to kind of be taken away and not exploited. They're just there to eat up the domain. So we want those, and we insist that they get used and implemented. So there is a sort of a process of supporting that. That said, then there is, how do we work with external organizations and manage intellectual property and the intellectual assets that kind of come up. And I guess, that's within those collaborations, there'll be a collaboration agreement. Typically that looks to say background IP, or the stuff that you turn up with belongs to you, will forever belong to you. Things that you create on the basis of this collaboration is owned by the organization that creates it. If it's done jointly, then it's jointly owned. So you own your background, you own your foreground, joint stuff is owned jointly. And that's typically how we structure these things. If we can avoid it at all possibly, then we don't like joint IP, because it's a little bit tricky to manage. But it's not beyond the wit of man to do it. And that's kind of a well-trodden process, to be honest. The real trickery comes, particularly around when we have entrepreneurs who are bringing in IP from outside, and how do we support them? We're using government money, state-funded support, and we need to kind of balance what's the net benefit to the state in terms of state aid and IP, and the way that we've done it around the QTech program is that the IP that entrepreneurs turn up with is effectively assigned to them on a free license. The purpose is for them to get on with it, and for the university to get out of the way, and that's been kind of a remarkable breath of fresh air in the system, as it were, and has enabled. Andy knows the stats off the top of his head, but it's somewhere in the region of 35 odd companies to spin out, most of which are using quantum 2.0 type technologies. They have entanglement and superposition as part of their sort of technology offer, and those companies have gone on to raise 45+ million pounds and for themselves, but that's not where the journey ends, right? Because I was talked about this virtuous circle. So the KPIs on that is, well, what's the net benefit for the university? Well, those organizations have then gone on to raise in the region of about 11 million pounds of Innovate UK money, and that's kind of been spent in Bristol, so the regional ecosystem kind of benefits from that, and the university specifically gets about 1.5 million pounds out of that 11 million, so that that's direct investment into continuing that sort of technological development and getting stuff out there, and that then has led to in the region of about 40 co-authored papers, as well as a whole bunch of new patents. So it's a IP is again part of the way that we enable our ecosystem to flourish, and to be as strong as possible.
Sounds very good.
I just want to quickly sort of add to that, just a general strategy that we've seen, certainly from our experience in QTech. And if I remember correctly, Anke, QTech was responsible for, was it fully a third of the new quantum startup companies in your report in the UK? I just want to throw that out there.
I think so. I mean, it's quite a high number. And it obviously is working. What you put in there. It's yeah. When you look at the map, I have a map as well. There's a big.
No, I just say in terms of the IP, I think a lot of academics can sometimes feel standoffish about doing it. Their impetus is to publish, of course it is. You want high impact journal papers, you want to get the research funding in, but it is worth considering before you send something away for publication, just having a word with someone about whether or not what you're about to publish could potentially have value as a company, because you'd hate to give away something that is actually going to have real impact. And that's not just in terms of that, oh, let's make lots of money. The fact is, you might be giving away something or publishing something that if it's published, other people might not want to commercialize that. And actually having IP gives it a bit of value for investors further down the line, and will allow you to have something that's truly transformative and put it out there, and it can be adopted in that way. So just having those conversations earlier rather than later is a real help before you try to start that process. And that's what I wanted to add there.
Thank you. So we have one more question. I wanted to ask a final question, but I don't know if we will have time. So this is a very complex question in the sense that, so Hamid asks, what is the technology readiness level for the current work from your various groups? And I could imagine that is very varied. Who would like to go first? Anthony, maybe?
Yeah, and just to sort of finish off on the IP point, I guess the real value in IP is that it is funds will invest in it, and you can start a company that will employ people. So you're going to create jobs, and right now, at the end of a pandemic, hopefully it's the end. That's exactly what they need. The economy needs that kind of boost. So publications are great for the ego, but jobs really sort of could influence people's lives in such a positive way, and that's really, for me, that's the reason to do it. TRL levels. So in Bristol, we've, as I said, over the last sort of 17 years, we've taken a technology from TRL level 1 right up to whatever the top of that stack is, 10 or something. And now it's time to sort of go back down again a little bit. So maybe not right back down to 1, but sort of 2 and 3, and then over the next few years, push that up to the middle of the stack, and then up and beyond. Right now in Ket Labs, we have work at all levels of that. Of the TRL stack, but we need to put a little bit more effort down into the bottom again.
So kind of build your pipeline again as exactly. Well. And also, I guess you understand better the needs of what something hasn't achieved. We've
been through the journey once. Yeah. So we can sort of, hopefully we'll do it much more efficiently the second time around.
Yeah. Reza, sorry.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, in that topic, on the quantum side, I mean, we are at the moment at TRL 1 to TRL 5, I would say. I mean, low TRL, we don't go up very up high the stack. On the classical side, because our group has a more history, we cover all the TRLs from the bottom up to really high level. But my aim is that also on the communication side, try to push from low TRL to more higher TRL, so we can build up more industrial and commercialization activity around what we do in our group. Yeah.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to add to that?
Well, we work with, I mean, the companies that we're working with, they're very varied. Some of them are in photonics, some of them are using lasers, some of them are in medical diagnostics, but all of them are commercially viable. So they jump that, they're probably either in what you call the valley of death between 4 and 6, where you're going through your funding or you're trying to grow the product. But it's everything from 5 and upwards, to be honest. Yeah, and normally about 6 if you're selling something and it's out in the commercial marketplace, it's sort of TRL 6 or 7. Yeah.
And just finally to sort of add on to what Anthony was saying, those companies are now employing 126 people in the region in quantum tech businesses. So, it's real, and the impact is there, and the net benefits to society are huge. So, I'm really proud of how the university has approached it and what we managed to achieve in this domain.
I can agree. That's the end. We're already at 11 o'clock. So I would like to thank all the panelists for their time today. I would like to thank all the participants who joined us. I hope you got something useful out of this today. And also I want to thank Bristol for inviting me to chair this session. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.